Time for Inside the Sixers. Michael Kaskey-Blomain, CBS Sports, covers the Sixers and the NBA. Set to join us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Inside the Sixers is brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan today. The all-new Matt Blatt Nissan is now open on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township next to Home Depot, online at mattblattnissan.com. There he is. MKB is in the house as we get you ready for the Sixers and the Blazers. Inside the Sixers with us. What's going on, MKB?
What's up, fellas?
All is well, man, and I know these late-night games are a little tough as we get a little older here, but out in Portland, what happened when they played the Blazers the last time? What did you think happened? Because the Blazers had nobody there. Was that just a scheduled loss, in your opinion? What did you see in that night?
Yeah, to me, Mike, it seemed like they just kind of overlooked a Portland team that was, really shorthanded. Like you said, they were without Dame. Obviously, they've been without CJ, been without Nurkic. I think it was just an example of, a team kind of looking forward to. They had the Nets game coming up after that. I think they kind of just glossed over the Portland team. And a lot of times in a game like that, you get guys on a team that, don't usually get big minutes or don't get tons of opportunity, and they try to take advantage of the opportunity that they do get. And I think that's, pretty much what happened. Portland had some guys stepping up, Gary Trent, Anthony Simons, Cantor, obviously, that had big games, and they kind of just caught the Sixers by surprise.
You wrote at CBS Sports about Seth Curry and the pace that he is on right now. And just give us a little insight on how important you feel he is to what the ceiling of this team can be.
I think he's crucial, Mike, and I think the stats don't really even quite do it justice, because if you just look at the raw numbers, the Sixers are, right about where they were last season in terms of team three-point field goal percentage, both in terms of, how many threes they're making a game and their shooting percentage as a team. But, Seth, just his gravity, having him on the floor is so big, I think, for both Ben and obviously Joel, and I think it's a huge part of the reason that we're seeing Joel have the monster season that he's been having so far. 2 years ago when they had that run and lost to the Raptors in Game 7, that was, probably the best that we'd seen Joel up to that point. And it's, we've said it over and over again, but to me, it's just as simple as surrounding him with players that compromise and maximize his skill set is, it's the way to go. Seth is a guy that defenders can't double off of. And if they do, you're leaving, a prolific shooter open. And I think just having him on the floor, even if it doesn't necessarily translate directly to 3-point team percentage, I think just having him out there has opened things up tremendously for both Ben and Joel.
Yeah, and I think I also saw you tweet yesterday about the Mavericks as well and how they're playing with and without him. So why don't you touch on that and kind of, you can also use that to defend how great he really is and his presence being felt.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. That's a great point. Watching the Mavericks this season, they're a team that I had coming into the season as not necessarily a top-tier title contender in the West, but, one of those teams right there that could make a deep playoff run, give, a team like the Lakers or the Clippers a run for their money, and they just have not lived up to those expectations so far this season. And, last year they had the best offense in NBA history with offensive rating of almost 116. They were 10th in the league in team 3-point percentage. This year, the offensive rating is way down, and they're dead last in the league in 3-point team shooting percentage. And obviously not all of that can be attributed to Seth Curry. Luka's been having a down season shooting. Porzingis was out, and he's having a little trouble getting back into his groove. But a huge part of that, I think, is the fact that Seth, he's not out there to spread the floor, just like he's doing for the Sixers. He opened things up for Luka last year, gave him the paint to work with where defenders couldn't come in and provide help. And if they did, he was, standing there for Luka to kick it out to and knock down shots. And I think, his absence in Dallas is exactly what he's bringing to Philadelphia, that floor spacing and that gravity so that their star players have more room to operate. I think he was, kind of a piece that Dallas might have undervalued. As good as Josh Richardson is, I think they felt that, the trade-off of getting some defense in exchange for the shooting would work out for them for the better, and it just hasn't. And on the other side, obviously, the Sixers are, much better off with Seth in the starting lineup as opposed to Josh.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was the thinking that the Mavs made that deal for? I mean, you're looking over here thinking, man, you gave up one of the top 3-point shooters in the whole league, in a league that's craving for it, for a guy who was very inconsistent.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I think they undervalued Seth a little bit, and I think they looked at, their offense that they had last year, historically great. They had guys, obviously Luka playing at an elite level, other guys that were coming in, knocking down shots, Tim Hardaway, Porzingis, Finney-Smith, Jalen Brunson, guys around him. But, I think that thought that they needed the defense that Josh would bring, and kind of undervalued how much they would miss Seth's offense. And, Josh is a good player. He's a solid player. But he's not a guy that's, we saw in Philly last year. He's not necessarily a guy that's going to come in and elevate your team on either end of the floor. And I think they are a little bit better defensively this year than they were last year with Josh. But overall, just the drop off on the offensive end is, it's huge. And I think that's definitely one of their biggest problems so far this season.
MKB, Michael Kaskey-Blomain's with us here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. You tweeted or retweeted this stat about Ben Simmons. The lack of shooting. Simmons has an incredible impact on the Sixers this season, and it talks about the three-point percentages with him on and off the court. So, kind of get into that a little bit about what people might not understand about how Simmons gets these guys these open looks and the importance of him even if he's not shooting and or scoring.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. It's something that he's obviously done at an elite level since he entered the league, and it's just his ability to draw and collapse at defense. He's especially in transition, but even in the half court, people like to nitpick and say that he struggles in the half court. But this year, especially with some of the sets that Doc has installed, I think he's doing an excellent job of getting into the paint and collapsing a defense. And we all know he has the elite passing ability. He's been in the top 5 in assists, basically since he entered the NBA. And he just is able to get into that paint and collapse the defense. And this year specifically, like we were just talking about, he has, so many options that they've, spread around the floor around him. Obviously, Tobias is knocking down his shots. Seth, Danny, you bring in, Korkmaz, you bring in Shake Milton, these other guys that are all capable of knocking down threes. And I think you can really see how Ben's ability to kind of just, get into the painted area and have the eyes of the defense on him. And then he has the vision to kick it out. And it's, you see it more. It's one of those things that maybe because his stats aren't necessarily jumping off the page in terms of his points or his assists per game, but you see it in games where he's not playing, like the game they lost. I think it was Detroit a couple weeks ago where he wasn't playing and their offense was really struggling at certain times. He just generates so many looks for his teammates, and it's central to what the Sixers have done, in the past, and it's huge to, what they've been doing this year.
By the way, if you couldn't see those numbers in the tweet, bros, before you get to your question here, when Simmons is off the floor, they shoot 29% from three. It's the worst in the league. When he's on the floor, they shoot almost 41%. That's second best in the NBA. There's his impact, even if he's not scoring.
Yeah, definitely. And you hit on Tobias playing this way, and it definitely takes away the stress of Ben Simmons needing to be that scorer like he was in years past. Is it time to believe that this is who he is?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's, this is who the Sixers thought they were getting when they first traded for him, and it's something that he's shown, flashes of it at times since he's been here. He had some good games last year, but to me this year, the main thing is just the consistency that he's playing with. It's not like, last year I think you would see some games he'd come out and drop, 20, 24, 26 points, but then he'd follow it up, with a couple of 12, 14, 16-point performances. And this year I think Doc has him playing, at such a level of comfort and confidence where, he knows he has the green light to shoot it. He's not thinking as much. He's just letting the game, come and flow to him. And I think that's, obviously when he's at his best. And I was one of those people. I wasn't skeptical, but there was, people were saying, Doc had Tobias playing his best ball in LA. Would that be able to translate when he came to Philly? And after what we saw last year, I think it was fair to have some questions about if we would see that Tobias. But, it seems to be as simple of, Doc basically empowering Tobias to say, like, hey, I know what you're capable of, and this is what we need you to do. It's not not a passive situation. Doc has pretty much said, like, you're our second option behind Joel, and basically the first option is a perimeter guy because, especially down in close situations at the end of games, it's tough sometimes to run an offense through, a big guy in the post. He needs an entry pass. They can double on him before he gets the ball. And in those situations, we've seen Tobias, obviously the play that stands out the most is the game winner in that Lakers game. But he's made a lot of shots like that over the course of the season where they've needed a bucket, and he's been the guy to get it. So, I really do think that now that there's, a roster around him and the rest of the players that fit, and he has not that, I'm not saying that Brett wasn't instilling the confidence in him, but he's clearly comfortable with Doc Rivers' system and Doc, how Doc uses him. And to me, it's a situation where there's no reason not to think that he can't continue to play this way moving forward.
One of my biggest concerns with this team is the six-man Shake Milton coming off the bench. Does there need to be an upgrade there? And is Kyle Lowry maybe a name that intrigues you?
Oh, man, I would love Kyle Lowry. And I do think there needs to be an upgrade, not necessarily to Shake specifically, but to the bench unit as a whole. I think the starting unit's great, but we've seen, as soon as Joel goes out of some games or if Ben's out of the lineup, they struggle to score at times. And I think there's, they have a lot of great specialty players. Matisse, showed his value just the other night guarding De'Aaron Fox down the stretch of that game in Sacramento. Korkmaz, obviously, we know what we get from him. Milton has, shown that he can come in and score, but I do think they would benefit from, another reliable bench player that can come in and give them some buckets, whether that's, a combo guard or a stretch four or something like that. I think that would be, a great addition for the team. And Kyle Lowry, that's obviously would be a huge upgrade. I don't know what it would take to get him from Toronto and if, they'd be willing to do so. But if you bring him in, you're probably talking about, maybe an adjustment to the starting lineup. I don't know if he would be a guy that would come off the bench. Maybe you start him and then bring Danny off the bench or Seth off the bench, which would, in turn bolster the bench unit. But, from everything I've garnered, it's definitely a situation where the Sixers aren't satisfied in terms of, their entire roster. I think we all expect there to be at least some sideline moves moving forward between now and the trade deadline or the postseason where they look to add, another, one or two more high caliber guys that can come in and complement the, the starting unit that they already have.
CBS Sports NBA writer Michael Kaskey-Blomain covers the Sixers as well. And what's your take on what's happened with Maxi and his role in the rotation?
I think it's kind of to be expected. Mikey's obviously tapered off since they've gotten their full complement of players back from the COVID protocols. I think obviously he did a great job of taking advantage of those minutes when, he stepped up into the starting role. But it's a situation where it's he's a rookie and it's pretty difficult for a rookie to come into a team that's in championship contention and play, reliable, consistent minutes. I think it's fair to expect for the rest of the season that he's going to have, kind of his minutes aren't going to be the most consistent. He's clearly not, the sixth man necessarily. I think they'd be probably happy to get in another, a veteran point guard to, bring in to kind of play, behind Ben or with Ben sometimes as Maxi kind of learns the game. I don't know if there's full confidence in him, from the coaching staff in terms of, is he a guy that you can rely on this year in the postseason to make the right play and do things like that. So, I think Doc is going to try to continue to get him minutes where, get in where he fit in, kind of try to get him opportunities because he's certainly, going to be part of the team moving forward. They definitely didn't want to trade him. Obviously, in the Harden trade, they're high on him for sure moving forward. But I think just the fact that he's so young still, he's, 20 years old, a rookie. There's the expectations for what he can do. In the regular season is one thing, but to rely on him in the postseason, I think there is a little bit of, skepticism within the organization that they might want to bolster that spot a little bit.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain at The Real Mike KB. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. He was our guest for today's Inside the Sixers. You can watch them tonight taking on the Portland Trailblazers, 10 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, MKB, I hope to see you soon, man.
You too, fellas. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, as we will talk to MKB again down the road. The Sixers tonight right here on 97.3 ESPN.